Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going deep into a river, into a forgotten kingdom, and into the oldest surviving voice of Islamic civilization in the Malay world. It's not a legend, it's not a myth, it's carved in stone. And for some reason, barely anyone talks about it. This is the story of the Batu Bersurat Terengganu, the stone that spoke first. If this is your kind of thing, overlooked history, untold stories, and smart storytelling from Southeast Asia, please remember to like and subscribe. Every little bit helps a small channel like ours grow, so we can keep bringing you more stories that matter, even if they've been buried for centuries. Unearthed, unbothered, unread. It wasn't found in a palace. It wasn't even found on purpose. In 1887, after a flood swept through the riverside town of Kuala Berang, villagers noticed something half buried in the silt. A large stone slab covered in unfamiliar script, quiet, heavy, and strange. They didn't call it history. They just called it Batu. Only later would scholars give it a name, the Terengganu Inscription Stone, and even later, a meaning. The oldest known written record of Islam in the Malay world. For centuries, it had been speaking. Nobody had been listening. A kingdom etched in stone. This wasn't just a stone, it was a message. Carved into solid granite, likely sourced from local highlands, the Batu Bersurat was made to last. It weighs nearly 200 kilograms, with 4 inscribed faces, 10 lines of carefully formed Jawi script. Each letter was carved by a hand, probably using iron chisels. Not scratched in haste, but planned with care. The work of a royal scribe or court artisan. There are no illustrations, no flourishes, just law, just belief, just permanence. A nation still finding its voice chose to write it in stone. Where the river remembers, the Terengganu River doesn't look like a place where empires begin. But in the 1300s, this coast was already a meeting point between worlds, between languages, between faiths. Terengganu, though often overlooked, was a functioning sultanate by the early 14th century. It had trade, it had structure, and most importantly, it had ideas. This wasn't a backwater, it was a frontier, and someone, a ruler, a scholar, a court, chose this place to declare a new kind of order, rooted in law. And in Islam, 1303, when time slipped through the cracks, the stone is dated 702 Hijrah, what we now call 1303 AD. That's 188 years before the fall of Malacca, years before Parameswara fled from Singapore, and more than 5 centuries before the British drew borders with a ruler and pen. It didn't just predate colonizers, it predated most of what we call history. In the world of Malay civilization, this is not the beginning, but it is one of the first things to survive. And it remembers what others forgot. The anonymous author, no one signed the Batu Bersurat, no scribe left their mark, but the tone is unmistakable. Formal, legal, reverent. This was the voice of authority, likely commissioned by a sultan or religious leader and carried out by a trained hand. The carver would have worked slowly, carefully, pressing belief into stone with chisel and will. Every word was chosen, every law deliberate. There was no printing press, no copy to revise. The stone was the final draft, and once carved, it could not be taken back. 10 lines of law, faith, and warning. The text is short, just 10 lines, but it speaks volumes. It warns against sin, mandates religious duties, sets fines for missed prayers. There are echoes of early Sharia influence blended with local concerns. 1 dinar for missing Friday prayers. 4 dirhams if you can't pay. Zakat must be collected. Mosques must be kept clean. This was more than religion. It was order, a moral contract between the ruler, the ruled, and God. The stone was a witness to that contract and a warning not to break it. Letters that brought order. The language is classical Malay, but the script is Jawi, Arabic letters retooled for a Southeast Asian tongue. By the 1300s, Jawi had become the administrative, literary, and legal script of the region. It gave form to local thought and legitimacy to law. Arabic gave it scriptural weight. Malay gave it cultural breadth. Together, they created something new. On this stone, that fusion is permanent. Language, faith, and state co-signed on granite. Before Melaka, before empire, we're often told that Malay history begins with Malacca. But Malacca was built on the shoulders of earlier kingdoms, and this stone is proof. In 1303, Terengganu already had Islamic governance, codified law, state rituals, and a royal presence strong enough to declare it. This was not a fringe village waiting for empire. It was already something worth carving into stone. And yet today, it's barely a footnote. Islam, not just passing through. Histories often say Islam came through trade, quietly, gently, with spice and silver. But this stone says otherwise. In Terengganu, Islam wasn't just visiting, it was ruling. Not just prayers in homes, but law in public. Not just traders at port, but scholars at court. By 1303, Islam was not a guest. It was the framework. This wasn't conversion. This was integration, spiritual and political, etched in a single voice. From riverbank to glass case. After its rediscovery, the Batu Bersurat began a journey it hadn't asked for. From the muddy banks of Kuala Berang to the archives of Singapore, then to a museum in Kuala Lumpur, where it rests today behind glass. It has been lifted, cleaned, catalogued, and too often forgotten. Once a public declaration in a living kingdom, now a silent relic in a city that barely notices. The first testimony of a new world, the Batu Bersurat, is the first confirmed voice of Islam in the Malay world. Not a myth, not a guess, a physical, dated statement. It proves that Islamic law, governance, and literacy were present long before Western maps arrived. This is where one world ended and another began. Not with a war, but with a sentence. Spoken in Malay, written in Jawi, carved into stone. What? The stone outlived the kingdom that made it, no longer exists. Its rulers are unnamed, their palaces gone, but the stone remains. It outlived the Portuguese, the Dutch, the British, and the bureaucracies that followed. It outlived maps. It outlived memory. And yet somehow, in its silence, it still speaks to the curious, the patient, and the few who still listen. Doubted, debated, declared. It didn't take long for people to argue over it. Some questioned the date. Was it really from 1303? Others debated its meaning, its place in the national story. And some, perhaps uncomfortable with its clarity, tried to downplay it altogether. But the stone didn't change. It didn't ask to be center stage. It simply stood as it always had, a fact carved in granite, too heavy to move, too old to deny. The script we forgot to remember. The script on the stone is Jawi, once the standard of courts, schools, and scholars. Now, it's a subject of political debate. Some see it as heritage, others as burden. But language is memory. And when a people forget how to read their oldest sentence, they forget more than just the words. They lose a way of thinking and a way of seeing themselves. Proof of a people written in stone. The Batu Bersurat is proof that Malay civilization had law, faith, and literacy long before colonizers claimed to bring it. That Islam was not imported, but internalized. That identity, when carved with intention, can endure for centuries. This stone may not solve every question, but it answers one. Were we here? Yes. And we knew who we were. The last word belongs to the past. The stone has no voice, but it never needed one. It has stood in silence through empires, storms, and forgetfulness. It has waited patiently for someone to care. And when we finally look at it, really look, we see not just a rock, but a nation's first whisper, and perhaps its clearest one.